The classroom buzzed with nervous energy as students from across the galaxy settled into their seats. The Galactic Academy's Advanced Tactical Studies course was notorious for breaking even the most confident cadets. Professor Zethkar, a towering Vorthak with scales that shifted color with his mood, surveyed the mixed group of species before him. "Welcome to your final examination period," his voice rumbled through the translation devices. "You have spent 2 cycles learning theoretical combat scenarios. Today, we test your practical application." Among the sea of colorful alien faces sat Sarah Chen, the only human in the class. At barely 5.5 feet tall, she looked almost fragile compared to her classmates. The Krathari twins, Vex and Zar, towered over everyone at nearly 8 feet, their chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Beside them, Thys coiled her serpentine body around her chair, her people known for their lightning-fast reflexes. Even Bumble, the furry Quellan, possessed natural camouflage abilities that made him nearly invisible when threatened. Sarah sat quietly, her hands folded on the desk, brown eyes focused on the professor. She had learned early in her time at the academy to keep still and observe. Her calm demeanor had become something of a joke among her classmates. "Look at the little human," Vex whispered to his brother, mandibles clicking in amusement. "She sits there like prey waiting to be eaten." Zar's laughter was a harsh, chittering sound. "I heard humans are supposed to be dangerous. This one looks like she would faint at the first sign of trouble." The whispers weren't new. For 3 years, Sarah had endured the mockery, the dismissive glances, the assumption that humanity's reputation as Deathworlders was greatly exaggerated. Earth's gravity was considered crushing by galactic standards, its weather patterns extreme, and its wildlife terrifyingly aggressive. Yet the humans who made it off-world seemed so ordinary. "Perhaps," Thys added, her forked tongue tasting the air, "the stories about Earth are just human propaganda. Look how still she sits. No warrior instincts at all." Sarah heard every word through the universal translators, but her expression never changed. She had learned long ago that reactions only encouraged them. Instead, she focused on Professor Zethkar as he explained the exercise. "You will be divided into teams of 5, he announced. "Each team will face a simulated combat scenario in the holographic training chamber. Your objective is simple: survive and complete the mission. The scenario is based on actual events from the recent Sector 7 conflict." Sarah knew about Sector 7. Everyone did. It had been a massacre. Pirates had overwhelmed a small colony, and the rescue mission had gone horribly wrong. Only a handful of survivors had made it out, and they were still receiving trauma treatment. "Team assignments are as follows," Zethkar continued, his scales shifting to an official blue. "Team Alpha, Vex, Zar, Thys, Bumble, and—" His eyes found Sarah Chen. The Krathari twins groaned audibly. Thys's scales rippled with annoyance. Even gentle Bumble's fur flattened with disappointment. Sarah simply nodded and gathered her things. "Wonderful," Vex muttered as they moved toward the training chamber. "We're stuck with the human pacifist." "At least she won't get in the way," Zar replied. "She'll probably hide in a corner while we do the real work." The training chamber was a marvel of holographic technology, capable of creating environments so realistic that students sometimes forgot they were in a simulation. As they entered, the chamber transformed around them. They stood on the bridge of a damaged transport ship, alarms blaring, emergency lights casting everything in a hellish red glow. "Situation report," came the computer's voice. "You are the rescue team aboard the transport vessel Aurora's Edge. The ship has suffered critical damage during evacuation of Outpost Zeta 9. Hostile forces have boarded the ship. You must reach the engine room and restore power while protecting the remaining civilians in Cargo Bay 7. The scenario began immediately. Holographic pirates materialized in the corridors ahead, their weapons blazing. Vex and Zar charged forward with typical Krathari aggression, their natural armor deflecting some of the incoming fire. Thys slithered along the walls, using her speed to flank the attackers. Bumble activated his camouflage, becoming nearly invisible as he moved to support positions. Sarah hung back, appearing to cower behind a damaged console. Her teammates barely noticed her, too focused on their own heroics. "Typical human cowardice," Vex grunted as he smashed through a group of pirate holograms. But Sarah wasn't cowering. Her eyes were analyzing everything: the pirates' movement patterns, the layout of the ship, the location of civilians, the optimal routes to the objective. While her teammates fought with courage and skill, they were being slowly overwhelmed. The pirates kept coming, and the team was running low on ammunition. That's when everything changed. The lights went out completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. Emergency power flickered on and off, creating a strobing nightmare of shadows and harsh light. In that moment, as her teammates called out in confusion and fear, Sarah Chen smiled for the first time that day. Finally, she thought, conditions I understand. The darkness that terrified her alien classmates felt like coming home. The strobing emergency lights created a chaos of shadows that sent most species into panic mode. Galactic standard evolution had favored creatures from worlds with stable, predictable lighting. Most aliens could see better than humans in steady low light, but the constant shifting between bright flashes and complete darkness was disorienting and terrifying. "I can't see anything," Thys hissed, her heat-sensing abilities overwhelmed by the fluctuating energy signatures of the damaged ship. Vex and Zar pressed their backs together, a defensive formation from their homeworld. "Where are the enemies? I cannot track them in this madness." Bumble's camouflage was useless when he couldn't see what he was trying to blend with. His panicked chittering filled the comm channel as holographic pirates advanced through the strobing corridor. But Sarah moved differently now. Where moments before she had seemed hesitant and weak, she now flowed through the darkness like water. Between the flashes of emergency lighting, she was a ghost, invisible even when the lights revealed her position. She had grown up playing hide-and-seek in earth forests where predators hunted by sound and movement. She knew how to become nothing. The first pirate hologram died without ever seeing her coming. Her knife found the gap in his armor with surgical precision, exactly as her grandfather had taught her during those long summers on the Montana ranch. The second fell just as silently, a hand over his mouth, the blade sliding between vertebrae. "Contact left," Zar shouted, firing wildly at shadows. "No, right side," Vex contradicted, his shots going wide in the darkness. They were shooting at ghosts while the real threat closed in around them. Sarah counted 8 hostiles moving to flank her team. In the steady environment of a normal classroom, her teammates were skilled and confident. Here, in the chaos that mimicked the true brutality of the universe, they were helpless. Sarah's training kicked in, not the Academy's sanitized combat courses, but the brutal education of a world where everything wanted to kill you. Earth had been kind compared to what most species faced during their evolution, but that kindness was deceptive. It had created humans who could adapt to any environment, who could function when everything went wrong. She moved to the next pirate, timing her strike with a flash of the emergency lights. To her teammates, she appeared for a split second behind the enemy, then vanished again as darkness returned. The pirate crumpled soundlessly. "Sarah," Bumble called out, fear making his voice high and squeaky. "Where is Sarah?" She was everywhere and nowhere. While her teammates clustered together in panic, she had become the darkness itself. The knife work was clean and efficient. Each strike was placed with the kind of precision that came from years of hunting Earth's most dangerous predators. Her father had been a park ranger in Alaska. Her mother was former military. Neither had raised her to be a victim. "Heads up," she whispered into the comm, her voice startlingly calm in the chaos. "3 more coming down the side corridor." "Where are you?" Vex demanded. "We cannot see you." "I'm working," Sarah replied simply. The confidence in her voice was something her teammates had never heard before. Gone was the quiet, passive student who sat in the back of class. This voice belonged to an apex predator who had found her element. She dropped the 3 pirates Vex had missed, her movements economical and brutal. Each enemy fell before they could raise an alarm or return fire. The corridor grew quiet except for the sounds of the damaged ship and her teammates' heavy breathing. When the emergency lights stabilized slightly, her classmates saw the results. 8 pirate holograms lay motionless in the corridor, each eliminated with professional efficiency. Sarah stood among them, not even breathing hard, her knife already cleaned and sheathed. "How did you?" Thys stared in shock. "We need to move," Sarah said, ignoring the question. "More will be coming, and we have civilians to protect." She was already studying the ship's layout on a damaged wall display, her mind calculating routes and timing. The transformation was complete. The harmless student was gone, replaced by something that made even the Krathari twins take an unconscious step back. "The engine room is 12 levels down," she continued, her finger tracing optimal paths on the schematic. But the main lifts are destroyed. We'll need to use the maintenance shafts. Those shafts are barely large enough for a Quellan, Vex protested. How do you expect us to fit? Sarah looked at him with patience one might show a slow child. You don't. You're too big and too loud. You'll take the emergency stairs and draw their attention. Make noise, fire your weapons, let them think that's where the main threat is. And leave you alone? Czar's mandibles clicked nervously. I work better alone, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Your job is to keep them busy while I reach the engine room. Once power is restored, we extract the civilians and finish this. It wasn't a request. Despite being the smallest member of the team, she had somehow taken command. Her alien teammates found themselves nodding along, their military training responding to the authority in her voice. What if we encounter heavy resistance? Thys asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time her teammates understood why other species whispered about humans in fearful tones. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of something that had evolved to hunt in the dark, to kill when killing was necessary, to remain calm when the universe tried to tear everything apart. Then I'll handle it, she said simply. That's what humans do. The maintenance shaft was a claustrophobic nightmare of twisted metal and sparking electrical systems. For most species, crawling through the narrow space would have been torture. Their larger frames, evolved for open spaces and group cooperation, were never meant for such confined environments. Sarah moved through the shaft like she belonged there. Earth's evolutionary pressure had created humans who could survive in caves, tight spaces, and underground tunnels. Her ancestors had hidden from predators in spaces just like this, had learned to move silently through the dark places of the world. Behind her, she could hear her teammates engaging the pirates on the emergency stairs. Vex and Czar's battle roars echoed through the ship's corridors, their natural aggression finally finding a proper outlet. Thys's energy weapon crackled as she provided covering fire. Even Bumble was contributing, his small size allowing him to dart between cover and spot targets for the others. They were good fighters, Sarah acknowledged. In an open battlefield with clear sight lines and honorable combat, they would excel. But this wasn't honorable combat. This was survival, and survival had different rules. She paused at a junction in the shaft, listening to the sounds of the ship around her. Years of hunting in Earth's wilderness had taught her to read the environment like a book. The vibrations in the metal told her where the heaviest fighting was occurring. The pattern of damage indicated which sections had been compromised. Most importantly, she could hear the subtle sounds that meant she wasn't alone in the maintenance areas. 3 pirates had the same idea she did. They were using the service corridors to flank her teammates, their footsteps heavy and careless as they moved through the ship's hidden arteries. They never suspected that something smaller and more dangerous was already in their territory. Sarah reached into her kit and pulled out items her teammates had never seen her use. Earth-made equipment, designed for environments where humans needed every advantage to survive. The filament wire was nearly invisible, strong enough to support her weight and sharp enough to cut through armor. The shaped charges were tiny but devastating, designed to breach doors and create escape routes. She set her first trap at a corridor intersection, the wire stretched across at neck height. The small charge was positioned to blow out the support beam above. When the first pirate rounded the corner, running to support his comrades against the noisy Krathari twins, he never saw the trap until it was too late. The explosion brought down a section of ceiling, blocking that route and eliminating one threat. The remaining pirates hesitated, suddenly aware that someone was hunting them in their own hunting ground. Sarah was already moving to her next position. The engine room was close now, but so were the remaining enemies. She could hear them coordinating through their comm system, trying to figure out what had killed their companion. They spoke in the harsh, guttural language of the Black Star Syndicate, the same pirate organization that had devastated Sector 7 in the real incident this simulation was based on. The irony wasn't lost on her. These holograms were programmed with the actual tactics and behaviors of the pirates who had killed hundreds of innocent civilians. Her professors probably thought they were teaching their students about the harsh realities of the galaxy. They had no idea they were giving a human a chance to hunt the same monsters that had terrorized the outer colonies. She dropped down into a maintenance corridor and found herself face to face with 2 more pirates. Unlike her previous encounters, there was no darkness to hide in here. The corridor was well lit, and they saw her immediately. For a moment, everyone froze. The pirates stared at the small human female, probably wondering what a cadet was doing alone in the depths of a combat zone. They had fought Krathari warriors and Vorthak enforcers, creatures that looked like the predators they were. Sarah looked like prey. That hesitation cost them everything. She moved faster than their enhanced reflexes could track, faster than their combat programs had prepared them for. The first pirate's weapon was torn from his hands before he could fire. The second managed to get off one shot that missed wildly as Sarah rolled underneath his aim and struck upward with surgical precision. Earth gravity was nearly 3 times galactic standard. Every movement Sarah made carried the power of a world that had tried to kill her species for millennia. Her punch had the force of a sledgehammer, her kicks could shatter bone. The pirates dropped like stones. The engine room door stood before her, sealed and damaged by the initial attack. The access panel was fried, the emergency override was offline, and the mechanical backup required a key that was probably lost when the original engineering team was killed. For most species, this would be an insurmountable obstacle. They would need specialized tools, technical expertise, or explosive charges that might damage the delicate equipment inside. Sarah smiled and reached into her kit for the last piece of Earth-made equipment she carried, a simple crowbar. Sometimes the most advanced technology in the galaxy couldn't beat a 2-foot length of hardened steel and the leverage of a world with crushing gravity. The door's frame groaned and buckled as she applied force. Metal that could withstand the vacuum of space wasn't designed to resist the focused pressure of a tool wielded by someone from a Deathworld. The door gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. Inside, the engine room was a maze of humming machinery and blinking displays. The main power core had been sabotaged, its control systems scrambled by the pirates' attack. Warning lights flashed everywhere, and the air was filled with the ozone smell of overloaded circuits. Sarah studied the damage with the same calm attention she had given everything else. Engineering wasn't her specialty, but her grandfather had been a mechanic, and her summers working on the ranch had taught her that most machines followed the same basic principles. The sabotage was sophisticated but not creative. The pirates had followed a standard protocol, disabling specific systems in a predictable pattern. They were thinking like pirates, focused on disabling the ship quickly to prevent escape. But they weren't thinking like humans. They didn't understand the mindset of a species that had learned to fix impossible problems with inadequate tools because the alternative was death. The engine room hummed with the barely contained power of a dying star, channeled through crystalline matrices that most species needed decades of training to understand. Sarah had 6 minutes before the core completely destabilized and the ship became a tomb for everyone aboard. She ignored the standard repair protocols she had learned at the academy. Those procedures were designed for optimal conditions with proper tools and technical support. This was field repair under combat conditions, the kind of desperate improvisation that humans had perfected during their violent climb to the stars. The pirates had cut the primary control linkages and scrambled the navigation matrix. Standard procedure would require replacement parts and careful recalibration. Sarah pulled out her crowbar again and began rerouting power through the backup systems, bypassing the damaged sections entirely. Sparks flew as she forced connections that were never meant to carry that much current. Warning klaxons screamed about unsafe power levels and system overloads. The engine core's containment field flickered dangerously as she redirected its output through maintenance channels. Any engineer would have called it insane. The power fluctuations could cause a cascade failure that would rip the ship apart. But Sarah had grown up around machinery that broke down constantly, equipment that had to work whether it was safe or not because the alternative was freezing to death during a Montana winter. She slammed her fist against a particularly stubborn coupling, applying the universal human repair technique of percussive maintenance. The system sparked, whined, and then stabilized into a new configuration that no textbook had ever described. Power began flowing to the ship's systems again. Emergency lighting strengthened, artificial gravity stabilized, and the communications array crackled back to life. Sarah, Bumble's voice came through her comm, high with panic. "Where are you? We need extraction. There are too many of them." Sarah checked the ship's internal sensors, now that she had power to run them. Her teammates were trapped on Deck 5, surrounded by more pirates than they could handle. The enemy had stopped falling for their diversion and was closing in for the kill. She could make her way back to them, fight through the corridors alongside her classmates in honorable team combat. It would be what her instructors expected, what would earn her good marks for cooperation and unit cohesion. Instead, she accessed the ship's internal systems through the engine room's command station. With power restored, she had control over everything from artificial gravity to the atmospheric recycling systems. The pirates who had taken over the ship thought they understood its capabilities. They were thinking like boarders, not like humans who had learned to weaponize their environment. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, implementing a plan that would have horrified any sane engineer. She began systematically shutting down life support in the sections controlled by pirates, while simultaneously overloading the gravity generators in those same areas. The enemy found themselves gasping for air in crushing gravity that made movement almost impossible. Those who tried to retreat to areas with normal atmosphere discovered that the ship's bulkheads had been sealed remotely, trapping them in their suffocating prison. But Sarah wasn't finished. She activated the ship's internal fire suppression system, flooding the pirate-controlled sections with inert gas. Then she triggered the emergency lighting systems, creating the same strobing chaos that had given her the advantage earlier. Through the ship's security cameras, she watched her handiwork unfold. Pirates who had been confident predators minutes earlier were now stumbling through a nightmare of crushing gravity, unbreathable air, and disorienting light patterns. The few who managed to remain mobile were easily picked off by her teammates, who were now operating in normal conditions while their enemies suffered. "How is she doing this?" Vex's voice came through the comm, filled with awe and a growing understanding. "She's using the ship itself as a weapon," Thys replied, her serpentine grace finally proving useful as she struck at confused and helpless pirates. Sarah made one final adjustment to the ship's systems, restoring normal conditions throughout the vessel while maintaining the protective barriers around the civilian shelters. The simulation's objective had been to reach the engine room and restore power. She had done that and more, turning the ship from a disabled target into a death trap for anyone who threatened the innocent. With the immediate threat neutralized, she made her way back toward her teammates. But first, she stopped at Cargo Bay 7 to check on the civilians. The holographic refugees cowered behind makeshift barricades, exactly as the real survivors had done during the actual Sector 7 incident. "It's over," she told them simply. "You're safe now." They stared at her with the same expression her classmates had worn: confusion, relief, and a dawning awareness that they had misjudged something fundamental about humanity. She was still the same quiet student who sat in the back of class, but now they understood what that stillness really meant. Sarah Chen wasn't passive. She was patient, like a predator waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. When she finally rejoined her team, they looked at her with new eyes. The Krathari twins, who had once mocked her stillness, now recognized it as the calm of something that had no doubt about its ability to kill when killing became necessary. Thys, whose people prided themselves on being apex predators, now understood that Earth had produced something even more dangerous. Even gentle Bumble regarded her with nervous respect, his evolutionary instincts finally recognizing what his eyes had missed before. "The simulation is complete," Professor Zethkar's voice announced over the comm system. "Please report to debriefing." As they made their way back to the classroom, Sarah walked in the same quiet manner she always had. But her teammates no longer saw weakness in her silence. They saw the patience of something that had evolved to hunt in the dark, to wait for the perfect moment, to strike without warning when the time was right. They had learned why humans were called Deathworlders, and why the smart species in the galaxy had learned to fear the quiet ones. The debriefing room felt different now. Professor Zethkar's scales had shifted to a deep contemplative purple as he reviewed the simulation data, his massive frame hunched over displays showing tactical readouts and performance metrics. The other teams had completed their exercises with varying degrees of success, but Team Alpha's results were unlike anything in the Academy's records. Sarah sat in her usual position at the back of the group, hands folded, expression calm, but her teammates no longer ignored her presence. Vex and Zar flanked her like honor guards, their earlier mockery replaced by a respect bordering on reverence. Thys coiled nervously nearby, her predator instincts now properly calibrated to recognize a superior hunter. Even Bumble kept glancing at Sarah with a mixture of fear and fascination. Team Alpha, Professor Zethkar began, his voice carrying an undertone of disbelief. Your performance metrics are unprecedented. The holographic displays showed their scores. Where other teams had achieved basic mission success with moderate casualties, Team Alpha had exceeded every objective while maintaining 0 losses. The tactical analysis showed enemy elimination rates that violated standard combat doctrine, resource utilization that bordered on miraculous, and strategic thinking that the Academy's computers couldn't properly classify. Cadet Chen, the professor's eyes fixed on Sarah. According to the simulation data, you single-handedly neutralized 17 hostile combatants, restored main power using unauthorized repair techniques, and weaponized the ship's environmental systems in ways that, frankly, our programmers never anticipated. Other students turned to stare at the quiet human who had sat among them for 3 years without drawing attention. Word of Team Alpha's performance had already spread through the Academy's rumor networks, but seeing the actual data made it real. The technique you used in the maintenance shafts, Professor Zethkar continued, where you rigged improvised explosive traps using standard equipment. Where did you learn that? Sarah considered the question carefully. My grandfather taught me to hunt, Professor. When you're tracking dangerous prey in difficult terrain, you learn to use whatever's available. And the engine room repairs. You bypassed 17 safety protocols and created power routing configurations that our computers classify as impossible. It worked, Sarah said simply. The professor's scales shifted to a frustrated orange. Like most galactic species, the Vorthak valued precision and procedure. Sarah's approach violated everything they considered proper military doctrine. But the risks, he began, were acceptable under the circumstances, Sarah interrupted gently. The ship was dying anyway. Sometimes you have to break the rules to save lives. Around the room, other students whispered among themselves. The stories about human Deathworlders had always seemed exaggerated, tales told by frightened merchants and colonial administrators about humanity's violent history and dangerous capabilities. Most cadets had dismissed them as propaganda designed to enhance humanity's reputation during their integration into galactic society. Now they understood those stories weren't exaggerations, they were warnings. There's something else, Professor Zethkar said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. The simulation you just completed was based on the Sector 7 incident. The actual rescue mission failed catastrophically, with 90% casualties among both civilians and rescue personnel. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about Sector 7, the colony massacre, the failed rescue, the political aftermath that had reshaped galactic security policies. In the 3 years since that incident, we have run this simulation with over 200 different teams. The best previous performance achieved 60% civilian survival with 40% military casualties. Most teams failed completely. He gestured to the display showing Team Alpha's results. Perfect civilian survival, 0 military casualties, total mission success. What you accomplished today, Cadet Chen, represents the first successful resolution of the Sector 7 scenario in Academy history. The implications hung heavy in the air. Sarah had solved a problem that had stumped the galaxy's best military minds for 3 years, using nothing but improvisation and the brutal pragmatism that humanity had learned during its violent evolution. This raises questions, the professor continued, about our training methods, our tactical doctrine, and our understanding of human capabilities. Vex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Professor, we always assumed the stories about humans were enhanced for political effect. What stories specifically, Cadet? That they evolved on a world trying to kill them, that they learned to fight in environments that would terrify other species, that they could remain calm in situations that would break most minds. Professor Zethkar's scales deepened to a thoughtful blue. And what do you believe now? The Krathari twin looked at Sarah with something approaching fear. I think we don't understand what humans really are. Sarah finally spoke, her voice carrying the same quiet authority it had held during the mission. We're survivors, Professor. Earth taught us that the universe is not kind, that safety is an illusion, and that sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and chaos is someone willing to do what's necessary. She stood slowly, gathering her things. We learn to fight in the dark because that's where the monsters live. We learn to stay calm in crisis because panic gets people killed. We learn to solve impossible problems because impossible problems don't care whether you have the right tools or training. The room was completely silent now, every species represented among the cadets finally understanding what it meant to evolve on a death world. The galaxy is entering a dangerous period, Sarah continued. The Black Star Syndicate is expanding, the outer colonies are vulnerable, and the traditional responses aren't working. You can continue training for warfare as if it follows rules, or you can understand that sometimes survival requires someone willing to break those rules. She paused at the door, looking back at her classmates, creatures from worlds that had been kind to their evolution, species that had learned cooperation and honor and civilized behavior. You asked why I was calm during the simulation, she said to her teammates. It's because I grew up on a world where everything was trying to kill me. Pirates in a disabled ship, that's just Tuesday for a human. As the door closed behind her, the debriefing room erupted in conversation. Students who had spent years dismissing humanity as an insignificant newcomer to galactic civilization now faced an uncomfortable truth. Humans weren't just another species seeking membership in the galactic community. They were apex predators who had learned to hunt in the spaces between the stars, patient and calm, and utterly ruthless when the situation required it. And they had been sitting quietly in the back of the classroom, waiting for someone to give them a reason to show what they could really do. Professor Zethkar looked at the simulation results one more time, his scales shifting through a spectrum of colors that indicated deep contemplation. Tomorrow, he would need to completely revise the Academy's curriculum, because today he had learned that when the galaxy's monsters came calling, sometimes the best response was to send monsters of your own. Human monsters, the kind that smiled in the dark and struck without warning,